Hi friends, I'm glad you could join me for this brief video about prayer and fasting in a time of crisis. We're certainly living in a time of crisis, everyone knows that. And even at this stage where some of the restrictions are beginning to lift and it looks hopefully like maybe this crisis will abate some, it doesn't take away from the anxiety and the fear and the difficulties a lot of people in our churches still face. So I'd like to talk just a moment today about the role of fasting and prayer in a time of crisis for us and for the churches that we lead and serve. For thousands of years, people who have wanted to draw near to God, to resource His strength and power for their lives, have been people who fasted. We see it all throughout the Old Testament. We see that Jesus taught about it and predicted a day when His followers would indeed fast, and I think that day for us is today. But what exactly will prayer and fasting do for us in a time of crisis? Well, there are a number of things that fasting does, and I think maybe it would be good if we started there. One of the things fasting does is that it helps us detach ourselves from the world and the environment around us. You know, few things anchor us more solidly to this world than eating. And fasting is a simple way, in a sense, of sort of lifting the anchor that has kept us so firmly attached to the world around us. And so I think in one way, the discipline of fasting allows us to sort of rise above the world around us and our circumstances so that we can focus more specifically upon God and upon the things of God. Now, another one of the things that fasting does is that it increases our desire for God. There are ways in which fasting clears our minds, heightens our senses, and puts us in a position to cultivate a very close, a very near relationship with God. So that's something else that fasting will do for us. I do think that fasting also helps us grow in humility and self-denial. You know, there are times when in the Old Testament, fasting was referred to as something that a person did to deny themselves. In fact, at one point, David said, I denied myself, or maybe disciplined myself with fasting. Now, all of that is to say, fasting has been a part of biblical culture. It has been a part of the lives of the people of God for a long, long time. So how then do you and I incorporate this discipline of fasting into our lives and ministries, and specifically as it has to do with the people that we lead and love and serve? Well, let me suggest a couple of things. First of all, let me suggest that we practice personally the discipline of fasting in this time of crisis. I think it's totally appropriate for leaders of the church, servants of the church, to carve time out of their weekly schedules to incorporate the discipline of fasting in their normal routine. To use that time, again, to spend in the Word and in the meditation upon the Word, in times of prayer, and simply in times of drawing near to God. So one of the things that you and I can do to begin this process is to begin fasting ourselves. A second thing I think we can do is to challenge our people to engage in fasting during this period of time. Now, I would venture to say, even as things begin to open up, a lot of the people in our churches still have a fair amount of discretionary time on their hands. A number of people still have not gone back to work. So why couldn't we encourage the people in our churches to take some time while they have the time to begin to incorporate fasting as a discipline into their lives? Let them know that fasting is one of those things that helps us draw near to God, that it's one of those things that allows us to focus more clearly on the things of God. I think we could encourage our people by saying when we fast, we often have a heightened understanding of Scripture. Our minds are clearer, we're more attuned to the Spirit. And I think fasting can do that for every person in the local church. So as you and I engage personally in the discipline of fasting during this time of crisis, why don't we also encourage the people in our churches to do the same thing? Give them passages of Scripture that they can meditate on and think about, maybe even specifically passages of Scripture that lead to personal peace and personal comfort and personal trust in God. Ask them to carve out a little time in their weekly schedule to fast and then to read and to meditate on those passages of Scripture. Now, I also think that fasting is one of those things that in many, many ways makes prayer more powerful. Now, you and I know that nobody can twist the arm of God. But think of all the times in Scripture where the people of God had fasted and prayed when something significant was happening, or perhaps even something dangerous, and God intervened in some amazing ways. Maybe you could plan a brief corporate fast among the folks in your church. Ask them to fast and pray about several things. Ask them to fast and pray about the health of the members of that local body. Ask them to fast and pray that people will use this time of crisis to turn back to God. And we could also ask them to pray beyond our own specific needs. Ask your people to fast and pray about other people in our country and in other places of the world who are struggling in the midst of this epidemic. I think so often of places around the world that are just extremely congested. I think of large areas of slums in the world where people are so close together and so packed together. They have no electricity, no running water. They have very little recourse for any kind of help, and they're probably most susceptible to this virus. So perhaps we could pray specifically for those people as well. So during this time of crisis, take some time personally to fast and pray. Challenge your people to take time personally to fast and pray. And then perhaps plan a corporate fast among your entire church. Give them a list of specific things they can fast and pray for. And see what God does with the faithful fasting and prayer of his people.